has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the New Kent County School Board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the New Kent County School Board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirement by Virginia law were discussed in closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the New Kent County School Board.
Do I hear a motion to approve the certification of closed session?
I move we approve the certification of the closed session.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Before we begin our meeting this evening, I'd like to make a motion to amend our agenda to add board discussion to the start of our meeting. Do I hear a motion to amend our agenda to add board discussion to the start of our meeting?
I make a motion to amend the agenda to include discussion in the meeting this evening.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Those in favor? So I wanted to, and this is a work session, so a little bit more casual than a formal board meeting. But I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about some things that have been brought to our attention over the past couple of weeks, specifically since our last board meeting. We received various comments, emails, letters from residents of New Kent, parents, students, teachers, and periodically we have read those letters and shared that information with the public. And so we're going to continue with that. We received, and any names that were included in letters have been removed for confidentiality or attempted confidentiality. We have received a letter from a group of concerned teachers, significant number of teachers. It was anonymous, but the gist of the letter is sent to Dr. Nichols, New Kent School Administration, and school board members. It reads, "We are a group of concerned teachers and staff members that have gathered together to write this letter to express our concerns regarding the in-person return to learning efforts. We want it to be very clear that above all, we want our students to come back. We miss them terribly. We feel we would be better able to serve them in person and that they need to be back in school for their own social, emotional, and academic development. We do have some concerns and questions that we hope you will address or at least take into consideration. The letter to the editor from a board member, this seems to be written as if they are not operating with the board as a team. We find it very concerning. We really would like the member to explain why what they were trying to accomplish by writing this letter. It gives us the perception of division among the board. Everything they wrote was not the plan. Was that not the plan anyhow? The comments about hurdles and hiccups, starts and stops are insulting. Do they have any idea what it takes to do everything the school board is asking of us every time we make changes? It can be done, but it's a lot. Every time we make logistical changes, it is extremely disruptive to learning. Transportation changes must be made, scheduling, class sizes, teacher rosters, grades, routines, expectations have to be re-explained, and so much more. None of this is an easy task, and to have to do this over and over with every change is taking away learning time from our students. Online learning might not be the most desired, but at least it's learning. Contrary to what some of you believe, students are not failing. The failure rates aren't even that different from normal failure rates. And we are very proud of the work we have done. We are very tired of being insulted by the community and school board members who continue to claim that students are failing and not learning. They are learning. But every time we make changes, learning is put on pause to adapt to these changes. Maybe the school board members need to observe some of our online classes so that they can see that our students are learning. The board member has clearly shown they don't respect the teachers they represent by their comments at the February 1 meeting. There was a statement, enough about what the teachers want. This statement is incredibly hurtful and insulting, especially given that not once have teachers and staff in this county been surveyed about what we actually want. It's been pure speculation. No one has asked us how we feel. Some of us have written letters, but the county and administration has not asked us what we feel we need in order to be safe. When do we get a chance to speak? We want students to come back, but we want it to be safe for them and us. We want reassurance that our leaders care about us and plan to keep us and students safe. Number 3, given all of the current photos that have been posted with our sports teams and their fantastic wins, it's clear that students are not following mask or social distancing rules and their coaches aren't making them. We are terrified of how this will translate in the classroom. If the community isn't taking this seriously and the students who have been able to participate in school events haven't been made to take things seriously, then how can we trust our leaders to make the rest of the student body do so when they come back? Why do we have to sacrifice our health and our family's health? We are scared and we need to be able to trust our leaders to get through this. Do you even care about us? How many teachers have to die or become gravely ill for it to be taken seriously? We will be spending hours with students, not just a few minutes. Will the mask wearing and the social distancing rules be strictly enforced? Oftentimes, administration doesn't enforce typical rules. How do we trust them to enforce these rules? These rules really matter. People can die. Many of us are vulnerable or have family who are vulnerable. Even those of us who are not critical or vulnerable can't afford to become sick. With all of that said, we do want to express how much we respect the hard work you all are putting into this enormous task of bringing our students back. The weight of every decision being made by our leaders surely has to be taking its toll on you, and we are thankful for your leadership during these difficult times. We hope that you can form a united front that serves the best interest of the students, but also considers the front line's safety and can help reestablish trust with us. Because right now, we don't feel confident that some of the people leading us even understand what they are asking us to do. Names are withheld to prevent any repercussions or retaliation. Another letter came through today. Now that first letter I wrote was sent last night evening sometime. This one says, please share anonymously if you like. Regarding the concerns about face-to-face learning, particularly with the middle and high schoolers, we would like to comment. It's obvious to many of us in the school district and New Kent community at large that mitigations aren't being enforced. We are concerned about how serious some of the students and staff will be about safety protocols, and now we wonder if they will be enforced. Our teenagers have changed their minds and don't want to go back into a classroom or participate in after-school activities in person. But they aren't afraid of dying from COVID. They've seen the statistics. They are afraid of the invisible spreaders who can spread it to their teachers, and they are afraid of the unknown, the longer term impacts to their own health, and no one is completely sure about. And now the newest variant is potentially more dangerous. Our 12th grade senior really wants to come back, but he can't rationally justify the risks. My stepbrother died from COVID at age 56. He was a football coach. He had asthma, and he leaves behind a young son. Another family member, an excellent athlete, age 19, cannot play college softball for at least another 6 months because of COVID's lingering impact to her lungs and heart. And a 20-year-old football player to my alma mater died from COVID last summer during training camp. Our kids love and respect their teachers so much. They are absolutely willing to make sacrifices so that we can all get through this. Why? Because they don't want them to get sick either. They know that adults who are not in high-risk groups die from COVID every single day. Our teenagers don't want their teachers to die from this disease because mitigation procedures weren't followed in the classrooms, hallways, buses, or in our gymnasiums. They wanted me to tell you how they feel because they believe that their voices are also need to be heard. Thank you for listening. So
How many people were on that one?
that one was from one person that wanted to remain anonymous. So I think we should talk about it. You know, we all are accountable for the things that we do and we say. I think I only speak for myself. I am an avid supporter of our teachers, and I think that we can't take care of our students if we can't take care of our teachers. I think that is, that's what I live by in my day job. You know, I take care of the people who take care of the people, and we need to take care of the people who teach our kids. And so health and safety has been at the forefront of all of my votes. I think that, I'm just gonna talk freely, okay? I mean, I think that Dr. Harding's social media post last night went a little bit sideways, and that was not her intent. I understood her intent the second that she posted it. I read it. I actually looked at the pictures and thought, you know, that could be, my kids could be sitting in that, any of those pictures. My kids play sports and they're not absolved from being in those pictures, but that, I understood that that's not what it was about. It was about us as adults being accountable, as leaders being accountable to that very same picture in 6 months from now, possibly showing up in the news because somebody's on a vent. And that can happen. So I think there's a lot.
Well, I mean, I think I have probably heard from, I don't think anybody could go on social media and not see the degree of unkindness, meanness, bitterness that everyone has felt, despite my attempt to apologize. So I want to say a couple things. One, I apologize most profusely to the student athletes and their parents because they didn't deserve to be pointed out in a direction that really belongs in the schools. I commend them for their hard work. And when I posted, I originally posted because they were social pictures. They had been on social media. They had been in the newspaper. There is nothing, originally my intent was to draw attention to something that is happening in this division. I have received more than a dozen emails from teachers today being grateful because they felt that administration, leaders, people were not taking protocols seriously. And that's just from this afternoon. But here's something that was really important. I had an incredible conversation with a coach who, when we both started out, there was a degree of tension. And by the time the conversation ended, it was respectful. And we realized that both of us didn't know things. There were things that each of us didn't know. I didn't know the extent to which her particular team had gone to be mindful of COVID. The many examples that she shared with me were really important. And it made me realize we've never talked to coaches about what they do. I will say that, and we talked about the impression of the picture. If it had been 5 minutes later, there would have been a picture with masks. She didn't understand that we have been coming to these darn board meetings for a year, asking for people to follow safety guidelines. I'm telling you, go back and look at the camera. We have been asking people, and in fact, let's go back to the governor's announcement. Let's go back to the CDC's announcement. It says, you may safely open schools if you follow safety protocols. We've not been doing it. Some of us wear our masks down on our chins. I've been told that if we walked around, we would see quite a few people and leaders not wearing masks in schools. How can we open schools more? We have, before the holidays, we had 8 employees that tested positive. February 16th, we have 47 employees who have tested positive. Prior to the holidays, we had 5 students who had tested positive. February 16th, we have 43 students who have tested positive. So here's my question. If we're going to open all the doors, we know we're going to have an increase. If we want to be safe, why can't we follow the second piece to the governor's announcement? We will open schools when safety protocols are in place. I was wrong to put pictures of students up. I'm not even sure if I had avoided the students and put just the announcement up, that anybody would understand that a year now, this board has come forward and everybody comes in here and they shake their heads. Yeah, we're doing it. We're doing it. And I gotta tell you, I hear from teachers, you're not. And so after 32 years of working in education, many of them in these schools, I want parents to be safe. I want students to be safe. But I'm not going to throw the teachers under the bus over that. I want teachers to be safe too. And they shouldn't think that we're divided. If we're divided, we're wrong. This board is wrong. It is our job to protect our constituents. If you're going to be a hypocrite, if you're not going to wear masks in other places, that's up to you. But don't come in here saying, oh yeah, we're gonna wear masks, and then we don't. If this board can't be leaders about that, then we're wrong. And I think we have some work to do. No, we don't always agree on everything. But one of the things that's so important with a board is that once we vote, we join together and we do the best we can with the vote we got. And that's not been happening. There's a lot of side conversations. There's a lot of jockeying for position. That's not what a good board does. I am so sorry to the parents, but I do want to say that there are many people who do not accept apologies. Social media is a sea of sharks that just want to right now tear me apart. You know what? You're not going to do it. I am stronger. I have worked hard for school divisions. I've made a mistake and I own it. Wouldn't it be great if we all owned all of our mistakes? Wouldn't it just be great? So what I'm saying to you is, students, I'm sorry. Parents, I'm sorry. Anyone else who was offended, you'll know that within 15 minutes, I took those pictures off. I took them off because it was wrong. But I also think it's really wrong to be mean. And I don't care whether you do it in front of me or you do it behind a computer. I have heard from several people today who wanted to talk individually. And I offered to talk to anybody, regardless of how mad they were, regardless of whether they were in District 5. I offered to hear what they had to say, and I will continue to do that. And I anticipate I will be talking to parents tomorrow. But the bottom line is this board needs to do better because you all deserve it. And administrators, leaders, people who are walking around schools not complying, if we've got the numbers that we've got before we open the doors, get ready. Let's do it right. Let's make New Kent do it right when we open. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, you know, I appreciate your candor and Gail and I see is that unfortunately we live in a culture where perception is reality. No matter how we intend things to be, that people will perceive them the way that they choose to perceive them. And in that particular case, as we have all from today, I've gotten phone calls and emails and to. I mean, I am sympathetic to the parents, as you have said, that have come across and felt like that. Some parents felt like that they came across and they literally just said, I felt like that my student was singled out and bullied. And that the school board was using their platform to single out my students, and nobody knew the full picture. Nobody took in consideration, as you said, after having a conversation, the mitigating strategies that were taking place. And we all received an email, and when you say doing better, we all can do better. It's not a perfect system. We know that. I appreciate the email, that Dr. Nichols sent out when he made reference to those pictures. He addressed the issue. He talked to the necessary people, and I felt like that he did his job. He talked to them. He addressed the issue. the athletic director and the coaches were made aware of the situation, and the bottom line is, they know that they have to do better. We all know that we have to do better. That's not the question. But I think that the concern is, and even with the letters that you read, is we have to remember is that we, in my personal, I look at just the people in my district. And the conversations that I have with them in the people that we represent the whole county, but the constituents that voted us in our district, they're going to be the ones that want our feedback within our district. And when you read an email like that from 20 teachers, the other side of that coin is there are 400 other or 300 other plus employees, and we don't know their opinion. And I don't want to take 10% or less than 10%, not that their opinion doesn't matter, because it does, but at the same time is that, and it's the same way with the parents, is we can't take one email and base our policies and our procedures on one email. I mean, we're fortunate in that parent has that option for their children to learn virtually because of the pandemic that we're in. But in the surveys that we've done, and the majority of the people that in my district, I would say that they want all their kids to go back, and they want them to go back
But
safely.
we did not survey the teachers. That is a true statement. So yes, this was signed by 20 people, but we did not ask the teachers what, and that's fair. That's shame on us.
Well,
We did not ask them what they needed in order to feel safe
No,
But I
that's
think-
not, if I can interject on
in
that
a
one.
survey.
And not in a survey, but we've been, and the administrators can talk to it far more, but like today alone, we ordered 20 air purifiers for middle school to come back. We've ordered, so I mean, no, not in a formal survey, but building based. If you needed to make it happen, whether you need your own plexiglass, I can't tell you how many plexiglass pieces. I don't want that to get lost. No, we did not do a survey, but we care very much about our employees and our staff. And whatever you need, from PPE to sanitize to from desk, whatever it is. I mean, we have a portal that you can go order at any time, and every school has somebody that's designated to order those. And it's better than Amazon. It is there within days. I don't want that to be, to your point, yes, we did not do a survey. We really handled that building based and continue to do that. Not me, our team met with our fine arts department, because to pull off fine arts in COVID, when you're singing and doing band, and you need different things. So we're looking at these tents that we need so we can be outside. We've ordered picnic tables so we do, all of that came through a lot of conversation with staff. So I just don't want that to get lost. I'm sorry, I interject in more
No,
comments.
and I appreciate that. And I think that's my other point is about, I think that the school and the administrators, and again, it's not a perfect system, and yes, we can do better. And again, however we want to coin it, is that we were all elected to do the job of educating students. And again, and part of that education process is understanding that we have to hire teachers, we have to hire staff to do that, 100%. But the bottom line is that I think sometimes is that we have to focus on what is it going to take now that I think that we have responsibly done, and we have moved at a snail's pace, because of all of the things that letter said, all of the things that you represented, with this whole cool heart thing that we decided, that we felt like was best for this situation and best for our school at this particular time. And so, yes, we're gonna have some struggles when we go back to school. Yes, we probably will have more positive cases, because it's the nature of the beast, like every other school division that is working to get back. But we need to make sure is that we have 3,300 or 3,000 students with probably another 5,500 parents. And more than 60% of them said that I want to send my kids back to school face to face. And that's why I think that Brian and the staff and the administrators have tried to work diligently on doing these mitigation processes, and why Cynthia does such a, incredible job of bringing these numbers to us, because they're legitimate. And I don't want us to spend so much time talking about what we didn't do. What I really, for our jobs, I want to spend more of our time talking about what we have done well, what we're going to continue to do well, and what it's going to take for us, and what strategies we're going to come across to get these kids back in school 5 days a week, face to face. And again,
And the things that we all agree on, which is we all want kids back in school. I mean, that's something that this board unanimously agrees on. We all want kids back in school. I remember during one of the very early conversations, I can't remember which months it was, but when we were talking about whether we could open or reopen at the beginning of the school year, I seem to remember there was a number, it was like 32. Cynthia, help me out here. Do you remember?
Number of staff that, once we hit that tipping point, we
There's
would
a
not be able
tipping
to.
point because we have staffing
Yeah,
issues.
It was in the 30s.
We
And that
have
was
not been
FMLA.
under that number throughout this whole time. Literally today, we have in employees, we have 32 in quarantine or isolation. And up until at our last meeting, we had 65. There is no way we could have opened any earlier than now. So the timeline of events, I don't think could have gone any differently than what it has.
Chairman Stassel, those are numbers from the last board meeting of the 11th to this board meeting, just to see the differences there. Just as Dr. Harding said, 8 and 5 right before the holidays.
Right, but
But cumulatively prior to the holidays, we were at 19 and 23, more than double
right,
when we came back January to February. So
65 and
right, and the
46.
employees were concerned about that.
And
they
if we
were-
had gone to school earlier, we would have just shut right down again. So it was the right call, because there's no way we could have run the school with this number of people in quarantine.
oh, I'm not
Nobody's
disputing
arguing that.
the
I'm just making sure,
process.
like, I'm just
Yeah, I'm not
making sure that
disputing the
we.
process. What my concern is that as we need to be aggressive in the strategies that we're gonna take moving forward to get the students back in school, and whatever that takes. If we need to, Brian states as he does every week, and Mervin, bless his heart, and all they try to do in transportation, because we're a smaller school division, if we have to ask for a waiver that we can put more kids on the bus, then we put more kids on the bus. I mean, the problem that I see in most school divisions, and correct me if I'm wrong, we have been restricted to certain things that we have felt like that we have been held hostage by the Department of Education and by the governor's office, because they say they want you to do this, they give you no funding, they give you no resources, and then they dictate how you're supposed to do it, and you don't have a bigger school to do it in. Well, then how do we become creative and lash back at them and says, this is who we are, this is what we have to work with, and this is what we got to do to make it work to comply with what you want us to comply with now. So if I was a bunch of parents, honestly, my number one place that I would go to the governor's office, and I would go to the Virginia Department Board of Education and say, you know what? You put all these limitations on all these school divisions with no resources, and you put it all back on our plate to the degree that we have to do something with the resources that you're not providing us. And then what happens is things get disjointed in a way that we can't come out on the other side of it. And to the degree that it kind of cripples us, that I feel like at different times, because, well, what are we going to do now? And my point to that is, we're in school, we're making great progress. What are we going to do to move forward? Again, Gail, I appreciate you saying what you're saying, and the humility of it. I think the perception of it got misconstrued, but I see both sides of it. Being a coach, if I would have been a coach on there, I would have probably felt the same way. Because again, they just felt like they were blindsided with it. And I think that that's the way the parents felt. I think that's the way the coaches felt, especially after Brian had already had a conversation with them and with the administration and with the AD. And they feel like that I just got my hand slapped again for what? They just slapped my hand on Friday about this.
Well,
And
I think it's really important to stress that in both social media posts, the one that had the removal of the pictures, I also apologize to the students. But let me say this. The terms leaders and administrators ran through the entire theme of the post. And I did clarify with the person I talked to today, I was not referring to coaches. Certainly was not referring to coaches outside of the school division.
sure,
I was referring to the fact that we have a mandate by the governor that says, we want you to open schools and we want you to follow safety protocols when you do it. And you mentioned earlier when you were talking to Andrea about you do not want policies and procedures to be dictated by 20 people. Those policies and procedures are dictated by the governor of the state, by James Lane at the Virginia Department of Education, by the CDC, and by health departments. They have issued all those policies and procedures to us. The health department discusses the procedures with us. It's not about those 20 people. What it is about, and it's more than those 20 people, I can promise you that from the emails I've received today. What I'm saying to you is that we have to find a way to support students and teachers.
well, that-
And to divide, no, but honestly, we've been saying different things.
well, we might have been saying different things, but I think that we all would agree is that, as Brian commented, and I think then it doesn't say very much about if, maybe I'm completely off base, but if teachers were that incredibly overwhelmed when we started back in this process of kindergarten and we did these cohorts, then my gut feeling is we would have had 100 teachers here. If they were that concerned about it, meaning is that I think that we are doing the very best job we can possibly do with the resources that we are doing. And again, it is not a perfect system. And so we know that we have to make improvements as we move forward because we bring more students in. But
I
again,
think the message though was about culture change. And okay, so this is where we've been so far. Now we're gonna do an about face and we're gonna look back and evaluate, is it working? And I think the photos show that we've got some opportunities to improve at minimum. So if we can look at that information and improve it and have these conversations that are difficult, then everybody wins in the long run. But
And there's an underlying, we don't like to talk about this because it's a national and a state issue. But I also think part of it is that some folks just don't believe mask wearing. Let me ask you, Mr. Mead, do you support mask wearing?
absolutely not.
You do not.
No.
And so you're sitting on a board where the governor has said people need to wear masks and you do not support, and I'm aware that you do not support mask
So, I
wearing.
mean, and you know what, and I'm fine with that,
Mhm.
because again, I am respectful of those people who do.
Mhm.
But as a grown adult, I'm able to make my own decisions and go where I wanna go and do what I wanna do. And you know what, as long as I do not physically feel like that I am putting a person at risk,
Mhm.
then I will take the necessary strategies to do that. If I am talking to someone and they're comfortable talking to me, and I'm like, okay, I'll ask the question. You're okay with this? Yeah, I'm okay with this. Okay, that's fine. And again, we can talk about your post about the semantics of how you wanted to word that and what you were trying to say and how it came across. And at the end of the day, you as an individual, as an adult, can freely choose to post whatever you want to post.
No, not as a board member,
not really.
no.
Well,
No, which is why I
No,
apologize.
which is why.
well,
I mean, if
but
I wanted to-
that's my whole
About.
point, but you posted it. Nobody stopped you from posting it. And so my point to that
Did
is,
you ask, or, did you speak for the board?
So her
Did you
social
speak for the
media,
board? No,
her
you didn't.
social media does say that this does not represent
Right.
the opinion of the board.
Yeah.
So it
right, so
does,
it
there
was
is a
your
disclaimer.
opinion,
in
and that's
there.
my whole point, is, so just like those parents and it can respond to those things, other people in our county, administrators, again, we could have a 300-person discussion here on COVID. And you might get 250 different opinions on it. And I'm okay with that, because ever since we started this process, all we've gotten was mixed messages about COVID. So we have heard time and time again, as the governor and as the Department of Education, they have made it up as they've gone along, because they don't know either. They don't know how to mitigate a disease or a virus that's never happened before in the US. And for us to act like or anybody in this juncture to act like they're experts, we're fooling ourselves. I mean, I am just floored that last week the CDC comes out after we got so much pressure and after Brian and the staff worked themselves to death to get a vaccine, and the CDC says teachers don't need a vaccine to go back to work. Now, to me, if I was a teacher, that is the ultimate hypocrisy, because we just pushed for 6 weeks on how we can get vaccines to teachers so we can put them back in the classroom, and the CDC says, why?
Not all teachers want the vaccine.
But
And so if they want to take that risk, then they are
But my whole
allowed to.
point is, Gail just used the point of policies and procedures from the CDC. And that's how the confusion happens throughout school divisions, throughout the US, when people are looking at how do we put kids back in seats in schools. And that's what my concern is, of how it is going to be a continual work in progress between now and the end of the year. Because we all know that the policies are going to change from the state, from the governor, from the Department of Education. It's all going to change. It's going to change in 6 weeks. And it is a challenge for Brian and his staff and the administrators and these coaches of how do we do that? Because they get mixed message all the time. And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is that the people in my district that I represent and that I've talked to over the last week says, please put my kids back in school. And I said, we will work as diligently as we can and safely as we can to get your students back in school. End of conversation. That's all I can say to them, because I don't have an answer for you, because I don't know what's coming down the road. And I think when you talk about being together as a board, that's the end game.
Well, no, the end game is for us to deliver services where students learn, where teachers want to work here. There's a dozen reasons why boards exist to develop policy and procedure. But when we don't follow our own code of conduct, when the VSBA, has advice for us that we don't want to take, those are the kinds of things where those are
We
leadership.
don't work
people.
for the VSBA, we work for the taxpayers of New Kent County at the end of the day. That's who we work for. We are hired and elected by the taxpayers of New Kent County to provide services and an education to their students and to provide them the very best education we can with the resources that we have.
And to continue to want to be knowledgeable about how to be good stewards. That's something we don't all walk in automatically knowing. If we walk in thinking we know everything, when we walk onto a board, we've started off at a disservice. You learn something every year. I can tell you, after 16 years, every year I go, I didn't know that, or I learned something. And so if people who've been here a year or two think you know it all, then I think we've got a problem, because it is about teamwork. It's about listening to leaders and learning. And honestly, COVID, I mean, we've been a very indulged society. We've not had war. This generation has not had war on at our front door. You know, we don't know adversity except for COVID. And it's serious because people have lost their jobs, people have lost their lives. We're not talking, I mean, you know, how many people have died in this country and how many people have died internationally? This is not a joke. It wasn't made up. I do think people haven't, even scientists have not known what to do. And we all are just trying to do the best we can. I mean, I do believe that. And I believe the scientists are trying to do the best they can. I think politics got in the way, but that's, you know, that's neither here nor there right now. What we have to do is to be good stewards. And our constituents, we owe it to the teachers and the students to follow the rules to get them back. And following the rules, whether we like it or not, has been very consistent. Masks, distancing, ventilation. Those have been three highest things that have consistently been listed. And that hasn't deviated. Other things have, those
I
haven't.
mean, one of my questions that I was thinking about today, just in terms of masking, dress code, if you will, is I'm curious to see what the CDC would say about if a person is 6 foot apart without masks, would that be considered compliant? If they are sick, because I've been told the way I'm learning in healthcare world is 6 feet and masked. So there's some variations there, but if our group pictures celebrating the students and athletes were taken outdoors, which is a very ventilated area, if they have their masks off because we want to see their smiling faces, can we space them 6 feet apart? I mean, I want to celebrate these wins. I don't want us to not be taking pictures. I want to see them smile. How can we see their smiles? How can we do that? Can we, if it's a big team and we can't get everybody in the picture, maybe we take one where it's, you know, they're close together, but they are masked and outside. You know, I don't know. I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing things that are out of the box or like questioning the rules. But I think we have to at least figure out what those rules are and whether they're safe. And then when we decide this is what it is, we have to enforce it because otherwise they mean nothing.
I received an email from a teacher who's been teaching from the get-go. And her email to me, she said I could share it. I'm not reading it. We read enough tonight. If somebody wants to know the content more than what I'm going to share, let me know, because she was very willing to share it. And what she said is that when kids come back to school, if parents think it's going to be normal, they're going to be in for a shock, because they're not going to be the social groups. They're not going to be, it's going to be fragmented. You know, they're going to be separated. It's not, she said she's been here all year, and she will say that it is not a normal experience. And so we have to be prepared for that too. People think when they walk in the building, oh, okay, everything's back to normal. It's not going to be like that. And this is from someone who's taught all year long.
Dr. Hardy, to your point, the socialization is not going to be there like it would in a normal. You are distanced, you are not intermingling, you're, you know, to the greatest extent possible. 5-year-olds are very difficult to keep apart sometimes, but even then, you know, that is, I mean, I was gonna make that point, I will make that point in our return to learn presentation, that K1 is not normal. Our K1 teachers will tell you it's not normal. Our 2-3 teachers will tell you it's not normal. Our pre-K teachers who from day one will tell you it's not normal. And I have bad news for people that are even thinking that fall of 21 is gonna be normal. We had a briefing today from State Superintendent. We're still gonna have some restrictions in place. What those are will be determined by health. But normal is, I don't know. And I don't know that there will be a normal. I think there will be things that are in place. And to your point, Ms. Daskell, the mask piece, unless you're eating or you're exercising or you're in an office by yourself, you should be masked. So 6 foot, 3 foot, you know, those pieces. And there are things that we can and should do better. And we'll continue to work through that process. I'm sorry but I wanted to jump in because I do talk to parents a lot and am a parent, but it's not normal. And even when high school kids come back, it's gonna be somewhat like virtual learning, but in a building. I mean, it's not gonna be what it was, sadly.
I would like to say, because Ms. Gaskell cherry picked an email that was unsigned, which was meant to be divisive. So I really want to talk about that.
Did she cherry pick it? I thought she. read the
Well,
whole
I
thing.
mean, it's unsigned. She picked one email that came out of a series of emails to all of us. Should we read all of them that came over the
We
last few days?
We can.
Okay.
We, I mean, if that's
I mean,
what we
she
want to do in
cherry
the
picked
next
one
meeting.
That was one that
highlighted
was
me.
from 20 people.
Is unsigned.
Mhm.
And, you know,
And they
on
said that-
January 11th,
they
we
said that
had
they
citizen
unsigned
comments from
They
teachers
unsigned it because
that
they
were all
feared,
named,
they
and we
feared
didn't read
retribution.
them. We didn't read them. So that to me is divisive. What they're talking about, you've chosen to use social media, you've written letters to the editor, and that's fine. That's you have, Gail, PNK 2030, you have over the years. You've written letters to the editor to express your viewpoint as board member.
Okay.
You have, over the years you have, and that's fine. Have I attacked you for expressing your opinion?
I
as a board
think,
member?
I
No,
think what's
exactly.
important is, and
So can I
I,
finish? Can I finish though?
sure,
So my letter was titled Gratitude and Hope that I wrote. It was. Andre's not here. I don't think he's here. That's not the title he gave it. I wrote that letter after the first vaccination clinic because I was so inspired by the work that Dr. Nichols has done to prioritize our teachers, saying we need you, we're prioritizing your health, we're moving you into phase 1B ahead of the 65 and older group, with second round scheduled for February 20th. And that was the hope. That's what we're tracking to, right? What are we tracking to if we're not tracking to vaccination? What else are we waiting for, right? So to me, that was an opportunity to say, let's move forward with our plan. You don't have to agree with me.
Was that a
But that was
rhetorical
my
question
point.
though? Because we were also waiting for the numbers to come down because we had
And they have
so many
come
staff
down.
in
They've
quarantine,
absolutely
right?
come
So
down.
we were
And we
exactly,
needed a plan. We needed a plan.
we have one. We
At the
have
time
one.
we talked, we had a lot of TBDs and the plan has been evolving. That's what I called for. That's
We
what
were waiting
people,
for the numbers to come down. You can't tell what the date's gonna be if you don't know when the numbers are gonna come down, to a point where we have where we have staff that are not out for quarantine, that we can actually run the building. How would we know that in advance?
Our
Said-
administrators are also working with a number of employees with FMLA needs as well that have not changed. And I just wanted to throw that out there because it is a challenge that they have had since this has started. And it's every year on top of COVID, on top of, the other just normal day-to-day illnesses. So a lot of those things have been involved in, not even in our numbers, and some of the challenges that our administrators are facing and some of our employees are facing with their health and their concerns with their health.
Ms. Winford, I think what's so important is for us to all try to be less defensive and to listen what people say to us, even if it might not be what we agree with. And I think one of the things that's so important for teamwork is that we can disagree and still not be defensive. And if teachers feel a certain way, just like coaches felt a certain way today, I mistakenly, and I'll say it a million times, posted pictures of hardworking students, and people were concerned about it. If teachers are concerned because of things that we say, then we should listen and not be defensive. That's my biggest point for all of us. We just need to listen better.
Any further discussion?
Board members, if it makes sense, if I may, it may make better sense to move an agenda item. So we've been talking a lot about our return work. If the board is willing, we can do our return to learn presentation, or we can go away from this topic for a little bit and then come back to it. So either, whatever moves the board, we're happy to go in whatever direction. So whatever makes more sense.
Because probably people are tuned in, so they're gonna wanna hear that part, and then they're probably ready to get off of listening to us for a while.
I mean, I guess, are you saying?
He's
Joe,
saying move item, return to learn,
D,
D up to now, and we won't talk about the budget until later.
Now, we do have exciting budget stuff, so I do ask that you stay tuned for that, but
Do we need to make a
I
motion?
think we gotta make a.
you would have to make a motion to move it. So I mean, I'm fine keeping it and
No, that's
this will
fine. I
go
think
pretty
it would
quick.
be better for the viewers at home, for me anyway. So do I hear a motion to move the agenda item for return to in-person learning to the next item on the agenda?
So-
I move that we move the return to in-person learning to the next agenda item discussed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Aye.
turn to learn. Presentation, moving. I do want to say how thankful I am to work with this team that puts this together. It is far from a perfect process. There are things that we can do better, will do better, and will continue to do better. So. Now we're ready. So return to in-person learning update. Just our criteria, we have not changed this criteria from the beginning. I think the thing that I'm proudest of the entire team, community board, is that we've stayed true to our plan. So while things have shifted and changed, we've continued to move forward, albeit probably slower than many people would like. But we have not moved backwards. So we have not brought a group in and then brought them out like some of our neighbors. And so it's been progress forward, albeit slower at times. So keep an eye on regional and county health metrics, our staffing, which we talked a lot about, students choosing in-class learning, and how are the students and staff doing. So we've been through those pieces. So I'll move forward. I always update you on core indicators. There's really good news this week. We've been holding 1228 as a benchmark. That's when we really saw the numbers start to skyrocket. So 1228, we're at 611. This is the first time since 1228 we've been under that number. We've been as high as over 1,000 new cases per in the last 14 days. So we're now at 513. It is still red, but the PCR tests are actually coming down as well at 11.5%. We look at that. I always show you over 14 days, but we have a 7-day metric as well. Some of the new CDC guidance, and DDH is working with CDC on this, is looking at the 7-day being more important than the 14 days. So our guidance from CDC, the VDOE, continues to evolve. I'll show you some of that new guidance here. So that's good news that we are trending in the right direction as a county and as a region. I've been showing you the state map. This is the first time we've seen some states now become orange states. I'm sorry, I do know my
Yes.
geography. Those are counties and cities. Do not ask me what they are. I'm not that good. But you can see that we're starting to have some hits of orange, and we do think in the next few weeks that we'll be there as well. So that's just one piece of the puzzle I wanted to share with you. We've talked a lot about this next slide, and numbers do differ because it's a moment in time. So I did these on Friday. Cynthia provided you updated today. A lot transpires in the weekend. So our weekends are our busiest times for quarantines and positive tests as we go through. But our positive tests have been on the school side have been better. Our quarantines still remain the bigger issue. And I'll talk about good news on the quarantine front in a minute. I do have a note at the bottom. We are going to be unveiling a public facing dashboard. So with cohort 4, we'll have the majority of our students in person. So we will be sharing a public facing dashboard that will be updated once a week. So you won't see it in real time, that piece, but we will do updates weekly so that you can see students, not actual students, but positive cases, quarantines, and so forth. We do it every meeting, but we thought it'd be good to have it on the website so you can see it in real time as well. So that's coming soon as we continue to evolve. So new CDC guidance. One of the biggest conversation points we had at our last meeting was about the vaccination process and how excited we are. And In our community event, I got the final number, 877 vaccinations done that day, which was a huge push forward for the county. And we have vaccination clinic number 2 on Saturday, so February 20th. The weather looks good. It doesn't look good on some other days, but we are looking at good weather on that one. We've also partnered with the Chickahominy Health District to do some additional vaccination clinics. We had employees go to Ashland. We continue to try to make that as available as possible. So this is new CDC guidance. If you're exposed to somebody with COVID-19 and you're fully vaccinated, you may not have to quarantine, which is huge for us, huge for a lot of folks. So here are the rules. You have to be fully vaccinated with at least 2 weeks since their final dose, okay? So most of our employees that went through the first round will get their second vaccination on the 20th. You go 2 weeks out from there, they would meet that definition of fully vaccinated. So huge for us. Are within 3 months of receiving their final dose. So that takes us basically through the end of the school year. What happens after 3 months? I've asked that question. Nobody knows. They're kind of making this as they go through. But 3 months does take us through June. And the third is the most important one. You have to remain asymptomatic since the exposure. Because the vaccine does not mean you cannot get COVID. It just reduces your chances greatly. So that's the most important part, and the one we keep reinforcing to families and to our staff. If you don't feel well, stay home. Let's make sure it's not COVID. And then we can move forward with that. So that stays in place.
Have we had any situations where that's been an issue?
Yes, we've had it on the staff side and we've had it on the student side. So we have had to quarantine a class because a kid came in and there was an exposure related to, we come to find out once we dissect this whole process that we did have that. So exposures are important too. If you've been exposed, but you feel well, you got to let us know.
Right.
As a student, we'll quarantine you and we'll switch you over to the virtual piece and make sure you have your packets. And as a staff, the board has been very forward thinking in extending the 80 hours of paid leave and those pieces. And we do a lot of telework with our staff. So if you have been exposed, but you feel good, we still want you out.
Right. Have we had parents or family members who've been symptomatic who've sent their kids to school?
Yes.
Okay.
So, yes.
Thank you for your honesty.
Absolutely. Well, and
And they were sent home.
right.
Once we found out.
So,
Was
Then you
there-
have to be in quarantine.
Was there quarantine related to that?
We
Yes.
have had that, yes.
yes.
Okay. All right. I think it's so important that we be, and I've actually talked to some people from Noreco and Hanover. And sometimes school divisions are not totally transparent with the information that they have. And I think it's really important that we say, and so we say when we're at these meetings, particularly work sessions, to parents, hey, there are people who are symptomatic sending their kids to school. Hey, there are people who are asymptomatic and don't know, and I mean, we can't blame them
No.
for that. I mean, but even that could be an issue. But someone who's symptomatic and sends their kids to school, and we know that's happening, wear a mask. I mean, keep a distance, because we don't know.
Or keep your kids home.
But we don't even want them to.
Well, we don't want them here. No.
So-
Well, yeah, no, you're right.
And I will tell you, because we talked a lot about protocols and those different things, we have not had an outbreak, knock on wood, I don't know if that's real wood, because of our aggressive quarantining of folks. We have over 250 folks that we quarantined this year because we're not taking a chance. We'll shut down a whole program, we'll shut down a whole piece. If you've been exposed by a family member or somebody in our building, we just shut it down. Now, that has hampered us moving faster to in-person learning because it's very disruptive, but we aggressively quarantine people, and that's part of our success piece. So, and that'll continue.
And the nurses have been just extraordinary in the
Yes.
contact tracing. I mean, at all 4 schools, I mean, on it every day, weekends, all the time.
I can't imagine the amount of extra work that it's taken from your office, from the nurse's office. They've done an incredible job.
And I say this with kindness, you don't want to call from Cynthia Pitts after work hours because it's not good. It's about something related to COVID and it's a, so, but I mean, that's the work that we do. Julia Loveland, our lead nurse, has been unbelievable. And she was new to us this year, and all of our nurses and all of our folks really have done well, but it is incredibly disruptive because we could line up any day and not have enough folks. It's just, we have had to quarantine a couple classes of in-person, so it's not without a disruption, but our families have been, for the most part, really good with those shifts. And we have had, because we talked about families that send their kids, there's an increase in families going, you know what? I was so-and-so and my uncle was tested positive. We're going to keep our kids home. And that's all we ask you to do. We'll make the rest of the arrangements with you, but just keep us in the loop with it. So, so this is not without its issues, but it is a huge win for us as we look to return to in-person learning. So, so cohort 3 is back. So the last time we met, cohort 3 was coming back the next day. So 2nd and 3rd grade are back. And what I love from Team New Kent, no matter if you're telling us we need to do something better or you're excited about something we're doing or whatever, it's kids need to come back. That came through in the letter that Ms. Stasko read. We want kids back. There's no substitute for it. We just want to do it safely. And our elementary team, who you've heard from quite a bit, have done a tremendous job of adjusting. So 2-3 looks different than K1. We had to make a lot of adjustments with it, and we've learned a lot of lessons. So while we haven't moved incredibly fast in this process, we're smarter, better, more informed, and ready to take action as a result of this work. So we're actually talking about some things that we want to keep next year related to things that we've learned this year, some ways we interact with families different, some ways we do some different things. So cohort 3 is back. We're 2 weeks strong there. So here are our cohorts. You can kind of see we have had kids in session from the start of school with cohort 1 and internet access and so forth. K1 came back in November. A lag between 2nd and 3rd, and for some reason there it is, February 2nd. So grades 4, 5, 6, and 9, that was the next cohort. And that was something different than we did at the last meeting. We were just going to do 4 and 5, but we learned a lot from bringing kindergarten in first, that we wanted to do the same thing with 6th graders and 9th graders. They've never been in the building. They don't know the layout, so we wanted to add them into the next cohort. So we shrunk cohorts there. We have a target day of March 1st, and we can certainly discuss that. And this is a work session, so please jump in at any point in time and ask questions. And then we have the final cohort, and I'll touch on those because the board did ask last time to set a target date for the final cohort, and I will give you a target date tonight, and I'll keep you updated as we work towards it. So that's the staircase. We're getting close to the top stair, so really excited about that. But tonight I'm going to spend a little more time on this cohort, and I'm going to ask a representative from the high school. I think Mr. Valdriguez is coming. He may designate and Ms. Gray to join us because you may have some questions about their schedule and what they're doing. And sometimes I've heard from people on TV that it's hard to hear them. So we're going to bring them to the board table or the hot seat or whatever you want to call it. And we'll kind of talk through those changes because we have some significant changes involved with bringing this next cohort in. So while they're coming to the table, I'll start talking through some of these things. One of the biggest things, and we've had conversations with families and teachers, and in this return to in-person learn work, I can guarantee you there's one thing for certain. Every decision you make, you're going to have somebody that is not happy with it. It's like a snow day every day. There's a rub with everything we do. One of the things that we have to do with this next cohort is we have to shift the schedule. And we have to shift the schedule because we can no longer run one tier of transportation. We have to run multiple tiers. And also as you bring in more kids, so we get 4 or 5 in, if we don't, for educational reasons, we want to expand the schedule. 2, if you don't, all we'll do is breakfast and lunch the whole time. We'll run kids through breakfast and it'll be time for lunch. So we do need that time as well with that. So with this cohort, we'd like to go ahead and shift. And this will be the only shift we have to make in terms of schedule. So we want to do this once with families. So secondary would move to 7:30 to 1:45, which is a little shorter than a traditional secondary schedule. The virtual time will mirror the same times as in-person learning, and that's really a staffing piece, and we'll dive into that in a second. Elementary would be 9:15 to 3:15. Virtual time would remain the same for kids. Really worried about the screen time for kids at all levels, but especially at the elementary level. So virtual time would basically remain the same. Another reason the schedule looks different than a traditional schedule is, keep in mind, one of the things we have to do for our mitigating strategies, and we do it now, is we have to clean these buses in between each run. So we take secondary to school, we clean the bus, we take elementary school, we clean the bus, and we do that. It takes on average 25 to 30 minutes to mitigate a bus in between. That just expands the time that it takes for us to run a schedule. So that does not occur nearly as frequently during a regular school year. So, and maybe that's something we may need to consider keeping, because I do think that is a good strategy to have in place.
Real quick, hey, Brian, so what
yes.
you're saying is that the shift when it happens on March 1st, that the kindergartners, first grade, second, and third graders, everybody's gonna go back at 9:15 now?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So, but does their day run as long? Does the virtual run 9:15 to 3:15?
So the virtual would stay at because remember, teachers are already here 9 to 1:30. So exactly what it is before.
Thank you.
Teachers' contract schedule, the number of hours will all be the same. Our virtual teachers will be assisting with other pieces inside the school. The elementary principals have a really smart plan on how to utilize personnel. But so, yeah, it would be exactly that.
Okay.
So I will tell you, in my household with a junior, this shift is not very popular. He is enjoyed, and it's something for us to consider moving down the road. And he's done extremely well with a 9 o'clock start. But that's for another year. We have enough things to take on this year. But I know it's not without its issues.
So how does the secondary dovetail with the other programs that students are leaving campus for in the mornings and coming back?
So, Ms. Wagner, you want to, because keep in mind, we have 4 additional regional programs that we're partnered with, and they all have different rules and different things, so.
Right, so Mr. Miller and I talked, I think with the Chesapeake Governor School kids, we're fine in terms of what we're doing. We will have to adjust student schedules when we bring back the last cohort for our juniors and seniors that go to bridging. But that's really more an adjustment to their schedules and putting them in a certain lunch. So it gives them time to be over there and come back. So we can make it work.
Yeah, bridging is the largest issue because it's 70+ kids.
And we met with Ms. Ellis, Mr. Miller and I did last week, kind of figured that out.
Okay.
But I mean, that's important. I mean, that's another nuance that we have to keep in mind as we shift schedules. So looking at grade 4, 5, so this is the breakdown, and our elementary principals, it's not like they're not allowed to come to the table, so they can come to the table too. They've talked a lot about these numbers continue to shift. So these may not be the most up-to-date numbers because we have parents still asking about, okay, I want to stay virtual, I want to do this, or I have an older sibling, and they've really done a great job of accommodating. You know, when the 2nd and 3rd grade cohort came back, our virtual numbers were high at one of the schools. So we actually have virtual kids at GW being taught by New Kent Elementary teacher. And it's working well, and we have fantastic teachers, but that's another shift that we have to do. We have some other staffing shifts that we'll have to do with this as well. A lot of kids have different teachers. And it's a hardship. It's part of the process with moving this forward. The teams do an extraordinary job of trying to minimize it, but there's just no way to make it not happen. So kids are adjusting, staff are adjusting. I talked to one of our elementary staff members who I think is going to have a harder time with it than our kids because she's grown so connected to her class. So while we are moving with in-person learning, and there are social emotional benefits to it, there are social emotional challenges to switching classes and teachers on March 1st or whatever the date may be. So, you know, pros and cons in everything we're doing right now. We're just trying to do the next best thing for our students, staff, and community. So moving to 6th grade, and we'll just look at 6th and 9th today. And when we come back in March, I'll bring you all the rest of the data with it. So 147 6th graders in person. You have a cohort A day and you have a cohort B day, and 103 students virtual. So you kind of see the breakdown there of 59% and 41. So for transportation purposes, on A days, we're going to specific parts of the county because we had to basically rezone. And then B days will be going other places, and we had to balance those so that we had an equal. We couldn't have 120 kids coming on A day and 20 kids coming on the B day.
So
Yes.
cohort A, when cohort B is in class in the building, cohort A will be at home virtual, logged into that same class.
For middle school, no. So I'm gonna get to a schedule with that, and I'm gonna pass to my expert,
Okay.
Ms. Gray, on that one, okay? And Ms. Gray, if you wanna, we can go to that slide.
You
If
can
you
go
wanna
ahead
tackle
to
that.
that if you want, while it's fresh in my
So-
mind.
Next slide.
Okay, so I know there's a lot of confusion on what the differences are between virtual and hybrid. I also know that there's a lot of confusion as to what asynchronous means. And I know as a parent, that's not a word that we use in our common everyday home language when we're talking to our child. So that's totally understandable. Currently, our teachers are teaching with a blending of Google Meets and asynchronous work. We have tried to limit screen time as much as possible and make the meeting work as meaningful as possible as well. When you're looking at a hybrid schedule, they would be meeting with that in person on either the A or B day, and then they would have the asynchronous on the opposite day. This is not really a huge change in what we're doing. It's just really giving them more of an opportunity. Actually, it might be beneficial to our students in the long run either way, because I think particularly with our grade levels and their developmental needs, they need that extra time to get some of those assignments done and to go through the resources they need and things like that. Teachers are still going to be available on those Fridays for check-ins. Teachers are still going to be available for their office hours after school. It's just that those students are not going to be tied directly staring at that screen during that entire time. They will still have some assignments that they're responsible for. So both of them pretty well kind of blend that direct instruction with children working independently. That's, I think, where the differences are. People think, well, you're going to either get a benefit from one or the other, but really you're doing similar things with the children as far as the students.
So on A day, like when cohort A is in the classroom, cohort B is at home working alone, basically doing homework or doing something sort of
Much like
on
they
their
do
own.
now, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, working through a project, working through the assignment piece, and it doesn't, to Kelly's point, it doesn't, what they do when they're with kids is different. And then they have the piece that they do
By
when they're not.
themselves.
Yeah.
So then, okay. And then virtual students, are they assigned to cohort A or cohort B?
Nope, that's the next
No.
slide. So let's,
Sorry.
no, you're good. That's,
So we're looking at some different things too at the middle school because we're not on a 4x4 schedule. Our children have already had one semester with us. And we do have a select cohort of teachers that will be teaching virtually. Part of that might be due to their need to telework. Part of it might just be because this is what their strength is. There's a lot of different variety of reasons why we have a cohort for just virtual. One of the things, and I'm going to get probably too far into educational jargon and instruction and things like that, but if you don't keep your children on pace and you have a group of children that are just flying through material, and then you have another group that's not, and the teachers are not trying to have a cohesive, aligned curriculum, it causes issues along the whole sphere of it. I don't know if I'm making sense enough of that. That's too far into the instruction. So we are looking at making sure, we've already been doing this, and I think some of you that have children in my building know this as well. Our teachers don't teach for the entire 63 minutes or 50 minutes of that class time. That's not best practice. It's definitely not best practice for an adolescent who's 12 or 13 years old. It's very hard for adults to attend to something for 10 minutes, much less to expect an adolescent to spend that whole time staring at the teacher talking. So we already are doing this, but we're looking at making sure that that's balanced as well when we look at the virtual schedule, so that those children are on the same pace. And that's also for mitigation efforts as well. So say what, for instance, a class does, God forbid, have to go out or quarantine, we don't want them to be on a totally different, like, I'm studying this in this one class, and this class is studying something else, and when I go work with a virtual teacher, I'm not on the same pace with them at all. If that makes sense a little bit. So it's not necessarily an equal split, but really honestly, if it was about close to, that would probably make the most sense for pacing, because I'm thinking about more of the instructional bottom line at the end of the day. How can I best provide equitable and meaningful instruction to all of our students?
So I guess for me, examples would be easier for me to understand. So if you've got Johnny and Susie, and Johnny is in cohort A and Susie is in cohort B, what does Johnny's day look like?
So if we're talking about a hybrid schedule. So Johnny, we have to go wake Johnny up a whole lot because Johnny has trouble waking up at 7:30 probably, but he would start his first period class. Actually, I don't know if y'all have I've done a mock draft spell schedule based upon the possibility of
So this
happening.
isn't set in stone yet,
No, so it's all dependent on what your decision is.
but when if we approve it, this is what it would be, otherwise it would just be virtual.
Right,
Right, so-
exactly. And it would continue on with the 4-day week.
Right.
But that's still, again, a blending. It's not, continual direct instruction. So you're looking at Johnny or Susie coming in on whatever day that they're in person. We have morning announcements like we normally do. They would be able to go get their grab and go breakfast and go back to their classroom. They would attend their first period class like they normally do. After about 61 minutes, they'd attend their second period. Then we'd have third period again, and then they'd have lunch, fourth period, fifth period, announcements, and then we have teacher office hours for the students that need that extra support or for parents that have questions.
Now, what's Susie doing on that day while Johnny's in class?
So she is still checking into Schoology, just like she has been doing all year long, making sure that knows what the resources are. She's emailing or messaging her parent, her teacher, with any questions she may have. She's making sure she's caught up on her assignments. It depends on what the teachers assign, but we do a lot of project-based learning at the middle school, and that's really been something that I've been proud of, and I want to continue doing that. And I think this gives us more opportunity because we're not trying to rush through content necessarily. We're actually taking our time and developing understanding of it. So there's an opportunity, more meaningful work in a hybrid schedule, or even with the virtual and the hybrid kind of blended together as well.
So during the asynchronous part of the work, do they have access to the teacher if they have questions, or?
It would be dependent on what the teacher's doing and actually the face-to-face.
Okay.
Now, we do, if it's a collaborative setting or something like that, then yes, he or she would have probably more access to that collaborative co-teacher in the classroom. But we still have the office hours and we still have the after school, not after school, but the Friday check-ins as well. But the students have been really amazing about messaging their teachers. I don't know if y'all realize this, but they have been advocating quite well at the middle school for themselves. And it's quite funny too, if the teachers don't respond almost immediately, it doesn't matter whether it's day or night or on the weekend or what have you. Sometimes every once in a while I'll get a student email me to say, hey, I haven't heard from my teacher. I'm like, well, it is like Saturday afternoon.
They're all
So-
grounded. They're all grounded because the
Every day's
grades
the
were
same.
in. Every day. I can
Well,
tell you
thank
what's
for that.
happening.
So I am getting a few of those. So I think it's just like what I say to our sixth grade parents when they come in. Everybody should really scare when their child starts sixth grade. And trying something new is scary. But we work as a team at my school, and Mr. Valdez school, they do as well. And it's going to be all right. We're here to support our children, our families, our teachers, and we will get us all through that together. It may not be perfect, like we mentioned before, but we can work through that.
And this is our starting point. So once again, the reason we're doing 6 and not going 6, 7, 8, or 9, 10, 11, 12. Ms. Gray and her team are gonna learn a lot in this. So when we come back for the last cohort, we may go, you know what, we thought this was really good. Here's what we, and vice versa. This is, so what Ms. Gray has set up is, I can't believe I'm saying traditional hybrid because I don't even think hybrid existed before this year. But this is, when you hear hybrid schedule, this is what a hybrid schedule typically is. You'll see a different version of it with the high school. And once again, that's gonna come back to staffing and course selection. All of your middle school kids are taking the English and math, the science, and the social studies. So you have to chunk it differently versus a kid. So I took my own son, he took TV, media, economic, personal finance, culinary, and history first semester. And now he's gonna take a whole different set of, kids are in way different places in a high school. So
So the virtual students, are they assigned to a cohort A or B?
they are
No.
assigned to a whole, they're a virtual student and they have a virtual set of teachers.
So their virtual set of teachers are still teaching them Monday through Thursday.
Correct.
Yes, but we're, just like I said before, it's not about trying to diminish what they're learning, it's about trying to make sure we're balanced out.
Yeah.
That we don't, I know how stressful it has been on the families with all the amount of work and things like that. We've worked really hard to kind of bring that down to a manageable level where people are feeling more successful. But we're taking a team approach for the mitigation piece, we're taking a team approach for the instructional piece. And we're not doing this like, just as a creative side, we're taking this from other school divisions and what they've done and what's worked successfully. And we'll see how it goes for us. too.
And we may come back and go, okay, the virtual is too long. We need to shorten that a little bit because we've seen this with kids and this with families and this, or, you know, we have it just about right, and so forth, but it should equate to a very similar experience outside of being in person virtual, but covering the content. The same amount of content will be covered.
Don't we have some issues with not having enough teachers in certain subjects to cover both?
Not in
hybrid?
sixth grade. So that's why
Oh,
we're
I
gonna
see.
have to look at what the other thing, the other piece where we were talking about protecting our teachers and our staff members. It was important to me in my building, because I had the ability to do this. Not everybody has the ability to do this, is that they weren't gonna try to do teaching virtual and in person at the same time. I may not be able to keep that in seventh and eighth grade, but I can do that in sixth grade. And it's developmentally for that age group, that's appropriate. Because they are our younger students, and there's a big difference. I'm sure those of you that are parents remember how big a difference there is between sixth and eighth grade. So while I can protect that, I will, but you know, again, when we look at some of the advanced coursework and things like that, and we only have one teacher being able to teach that, it's gonna become more challenging.
Thank you.
No problem.
Just one more question on the asynchronous days. You talked about the students going into Schoology and they don't have to check in at all though on asynchronous
No,
days.
but what we do, the way we take
No
attendance
attendance.
is what the VDOE had set forth, which was the teacher does have the ability to monitor whether or not a child has checked Schoology at all.
Okay.
Or has actually opened that assignment. So if there's an expectation there, it's not to make it more stressful for the parent, but if we're checking attendance and we decide that that's what we need to do, then we do have the ability to do that if need be, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So that's kind of the model that we're looking at for this next cohort for middle school. So we look through that piece. So we're also talking about our ninth grade. So you can see that they have in-person cohort. They've thrown their school colors on this as well. So you have silver days and blue days. You can see the layout, 129 kids in person, 169 virtual. Why is that not adding up for me?
And the percentages aren't. matching.
Percentages are,
Because the 60% is of the responders.
oh, got
The
it.
57 is the
That's
total
a
population.
bigger-
Gotcha,
that's
gotcha.
a thicker line across
Yes,
the
ma'am.
bottom cell.
So you can see how it's broken out there with in-person and virtual. The high school, because of, once again, we're going back to staffing, we're going back to course selection, we're going back to meeting the needs of kids and the needs of the staff. So Mr. Rodriguez worked with his staff on how to do this moving forward. And this is the recommendation for ninth grade. We come back to you when we go for the last cohorts and go, here's what we learned in ninth, here's what we need to do that's a little bit different. So I believe we have, so Ms. Vadry, if you want to talk about virtual and in-person and how that works, because it is different.
So Ms. Gray sort of segued into what the high school schedule will look like because of the needs of certain content areas and teachers and their certifications. We are going to need to do virtual and in-person at the same time. It's not optimal, we know that, but it is the best way we think to be able to service our kids. It's really not that big a shift because even in the past several years, it's not unusual to walk into a high school classroom and all the kids have their Chromebooks open anyway. So they're doing a lot of virtual kind of learning, but in face-to-face. So it'll look very much like that. Those are the blocks. We've built in time in each block for office hours during the block. So that'll give virtual kids a chance to call in or message in during that time. It won't interrupt instruction. And that's, the teachers will have the freedom to designate, okay, the first 20 minutes today are office hours, or the last 20 minutes, or whatever they works for them in doing what they're doing. We've also built in some time for cleanup time, for all students will wipe down their work areas when they arrive in a class, and they'll wipe them down again when they leave the class. So that'll be on them. They'll take care of that. And you can see about the 20 minutes devoted to sanitation and working for in-person learning. Fridays will continue to be a check-in day, and we use the same schedule that we're using now. We will have 3 lunches. We're going to do grab and go breakfast when they come in. So they'll grab a bag, breakfast, go to their classroom. We will need to move about the building. So we're going to have some one-way streets in terms of hallways. We'll have signage everywhere directing students that they can only go in certain directions, along with obviously all the signage we have. Lunches we'll do typically like we generally do, and we set it up this way, even though our numbers dictate that we could really probably have 1 lunch. We wanted to go ahead and set the schedule so when we bring in 10, 11, and 12, we wouldn't have to change the schedule again. Our plan right now, we can accommodate about 125 kids in the cafeteria under our current online access center setup with the desk spaced apart like that. And that's the setup we'll use for lunch, is there'll be individual desks, remain spaced. We'll move our online access center, which we'll still need, into our auxiliary gym, which will be off season, and we won't really need that for athletics or gym classes, can use the big gym.
Mr. Vadry, to Dr. Harding's point earlier, that's a very different lunch experience than a kid would typically have. But it is the lunch experience we need to have in order to mitigate and to cohort and to trace. So
How do you avoid food fights?
They have to throw it a lot further because they're spaced out. No, it's been actually having the online access center kids has really been a great learning experience because they eat lunch. And so they go through the line, they're spaced out, they sit at their chairs and they eat their lunch. So other than the movement in the building, which we haven't had, that's been sort of almost an experiment in terms of mitigation and feeding kids and getting them in and out of the building, doing temperature checks, all that kind of stuff.
And all of the kids know what days that they know about all of these. I'm sure the teachers are talking about it in each of their classes.
They will after tonight.
So we were walking a line with this. We wanted to communicate to families and give as much information as possible, but also respect the process with the board and the approval piece. So we have letters ready to go at some levels. We have, communication ready to go across. But that's kind of where we are with that. And we have, so it's the 16th, this would be the first, if approved, we have that time.
But I think, all the correspondence that I've seen has all been pending board
Yes,
approval, yada, yada, yada. All the,
So
this is what it'll look like when.
we couldn't exactly wait until the 16th to kind of say, hey, here's what, because we wanted to have that feedback first. So they've done a nice job on that line with the process.
So the length of both the middle school and the high school, the length of the day is based on, basically it's driven by transportation. Because we had some concerns from folks about the change in the bell schedule and concerns that either the anticipated extended screen time or other things were going to be an issue. So
We really fully do not expect any teachers to have a kid on a screen for an hour and 20 minutes. They're not doing that now. But within the ideas, within that hour and 20 minutes, you've got flexibility to maybe I want to do something with this group of students and you guys go off and do something else for a while, log back in, that kind of flexibility. And that gives us the opportunity to do that.
And the same for us as well. I mean, that's one of the things that was the concern with the virtual learning is not to extend the time and make them sit in my computer for longer. It's to make it more meaningful and to make it much more engaging for the students as well.
But, with all of this, we walk a lot of lines as far as staffing, as far as mitigation, all of these things take time, effort, energy, and those different components. So part of it is driven by the logistics related to it. And then, also the educational piece to it. Like, what's the earliest we could start a day? And I think we'd have some high school kids that would argue that this is too early. But on the other end, at what time are we okay with our elementary kids getting home too? So we have a start and an end. And then how long does it take for us to turn around the transportation fleet in between? So building all of those different things really, because if we pick up kids, if we start at 7:30, we have to be ready for elementary. So that's why elementary dropped back 15 minutes because we couldn't get elementary kids there by 9, even if we left by 7:30. So now I will say that is the plan. And Mervin and his team have done a tremendous job. We're going to have late buses, so prepare for that. We're going to have some bumps along the way. We could have double routes. We could have those different kind of pieces. But our families have really been flexible with K-3. We just continue to ask for flexibility as we go through this process. Math guidelines, we kind of talked about this. So this kind of working through consequences for students. I will say at the elementary level, we do have math that drop down. It's typically because you're 5 or 6. We do realize as kids get older that, there could be that issue. I just want to go on record on the math side of things. It's a condition of returning to school. And that if you can't follow that condition, then we have another option for you. And that's virtual. Not that virtual is a consequence, but it's just to protect our staff and to protect our students and to follow the guidelines we set forth. That we're not going to be chasing the mask piece every day. It really is pretty clear. Either you wear it or you don't. It's a condition of being in person or being virtual. So I want our staff, I want our families to know, and we have held this line. But we do see it being a challenge as kids get older, because kids tend to challenge as they get older. But I just want to go on record and with board support that it's not something that we're going to be chasing every day, because either you do it or you can't be a part of our in-person program. We will chase it, we will enforce it, but we're not going to go the last 3.5 months going, okay, Ms. Gregory, or I wouldn't say, Kelly, put your mask up, put your mask on, but you need to do it. So I know at the middle school, they've kind of gone through this process with 6th grade families. We'll see how that's working. We'll look at what we need to do differently, but we do plan on a hard line on this one. Hopefully we won't need as hard a line because kids will come in and they'll do their part on that. But we just want to go on record that, we will hold a hard line on this one. And for staff as well. I didn't mention the staff piece, but that has been a learning for us that really mask wearing is a disciplinary issue with staff. And I think it took some places a little bit to get used to that. But it's not something that can be optional. It is something that part of what we do. And if you don't comply with that, it is disciplinary action, just like it would be for anything else, any other rules that we have, being here on time, supervising kids, whatever the case might be, it has to be treated in that manner.
The way healthcare workers have done for all these months. I mean, they are essential workers, like we've done with healthcare workers.
Yeah. So next steps, planning and communication for cohort 4, that is pending board approval. We do have our second vaccination clinic on Saturday. One of the things that I wanted to make sure I included, because I keep forgetting to say it, is when elementary first came back, K1, we had a health department walkthrough, the Chickahominy Health Department. We have our eyes on it. We've been doing it in different forms and fashions, but we want outside eyes on it and for them to give us recommendations. So when they came to the elementary schools, they gave us some recommendations that we were able to put in place in terms of isolation rooms and different things like that. We've since applied those things to the middle and high school, but we know that middle and high school is different than elementary. So we have another health department walkthrough plan for the middle and high school, and I can let the board know when that is. If you'd like to be a part of that walkthrough or do a separate walkthrough, we can do that as well. But we want independent eyes on it from a tracing standpoint, from a readiness standpoint. Cohort 4 will return on March 1st. And there's the target date for the final cohort. March 22nd is 2 weeks prior to spring break. So we would want to, if we got to that target date, I do think that is the fastest, and I think that is aggressive for that final cohort. That's a large number of kids coming back. That's a shorter time for us to learn lessons with 6 and 9, but the board asked for a target date for us to work towards and put it out there. I would come back to you. Of course, I would communicate in between, but March 1st, I would be able to tell you our readiness to make that happen, which is our next board meeting.
So do we anticipate, even with the March 22nd and bringing everyone back, that we would still be on this A/B system? Is that what you're thinking?
So one of the things we have not gotten relief from are the space constraints. And that is what prevents us from transportation and building, specifically the middle school, from bringing everybody back 4 days a week. We've been able to manage that at the elementary. It's been incredibly tight. And there have been challenges with, that's the biggest obstacle. So as guideline changes, that could be, we could get all the kids in and go, okay, we could do this. So, that is something that we'll continue to discuss. And by the time we come back March 1st, it could be, here's something that we could do differently. Our elementary administrators will tell you that they love having kids every day and they're not dealing with a hybrid schedule because it is a tough schedule for all of us to manage. But it'll come down space and ability to mitigate. And we push that 3-foot envelope with that. And that is as far as they'll allow us to push even within the guidelines. I do have a meeting with the Virginia Department of Health and the American Pediatric Association next Tuesday. So I'll keep you updated. I don't see anything going below 3 feet at this point. It's actually starting to swing, move more towards that 6 feet. 6 feet is the gold standard. 3 feet is allowable. 6 feet is almost impossible to even pull off a hybrid in New Kent, which is why Quinton Elementary is coming on board. We need that space. Yeah, I think if you ask either administrator, they would tell you they would want the kids back each day and not doing these pieces.
And so 3 weeks is the very minimum transition time from when the 9th graders get in the building. You're going to take what's going to happen in that 3-week time frame between 9 and when 10 through 12 come back.
Well, I think the first thing is we're going to see what we've done right and see what we need to adjust based on what we see from our 9th graders. Other than that, after that, we would start looking at breaking our 10, 11, and 12 into those cohorts and looking at their rosters to make sure the class sizes are still balanced and still maintain, we can't have too many kids in a class. So do we need to change schedules? Do we need to adjust some kids and move them to a different section maybe? That'll be the biggest logistical issue.
Do you expect any issues with your traffic patterns that you're trying to implement?
With the 9th graders coming in, there's so few, and this is a large building, it really shouldn't be an issue. And if you look at the number of respondents for 10, 11, and 12, they're very similar in terms of percentages. So we would probably be operating at about half capacity anyway. So I think our plan is to have an orientation meeting with our freshmen when they come in the first day, both days, and go over, this is the traffic pattern, this is the signage, these are the protocols. We will probably need to do that with our upper level kids as well, even though they know the building.
And middle school's similar
I
scenario?
would have to echo my colleagues, I think, at the elementary school that, the phases are kind of like a brand new school year every time you come in. So, even that we are working really hard, to create schedules, to try to ensure that students have as much of the same teachers or many of the same teachers that they had, which is a challenge, I will say. To make sure the schedule is flexible enough, to make sure that our teachers feel prepared, particularly with the curriculum and the content and the switch back to more in-person learning. The communication to the parents. I mean, we already had a 6th grade parent information night, but we'll need one for 7th and 8th grade as well. There's a lot of different moving pieces to get prepared for a return to learn. And of course, we welcome that 100%. But our team's been working tirelessly to try to get it all into place, I think.
Yeah, we almost have to do the events that we usually do to start a school year, even though we've been in school. We have to do them over again because now kids are actually coming into the building. So,
Chris, one quick question. When we get to the point of bringing the high school students back, do you see any challenges for those students that will be driving to school and how you're going to be able to navigate those students in like them coming in the building and leaving and how are we gonna track all of that so it makes it work under the current scenario?
Right, and right now our plan is with the freshmen, we feel like they're really gonna be in 2 groups. They're either gonna be riders that their parents drop them off, in which case they'll come in the main doors and they'll be checked and screened there. Or they're bus riders and they'll come in the side door that opens into the orange section and they'll be checked and screened there. Obviously with drivers, we're gonna probably, depending on the numbers, I think what we can do is not use the senior parking lot and have drivers park all in the front lot and bring them in that way. So that way we're still controlling the number of entrances, and we can still screen them. In terms of signing out, we've got the new situation in the office where you get buzzed in, buzzed out through the double doors. So we can kind of control that a lot more than we've controlled in the past as well. So, but that'll be a learning curve as well.
not many freshman drivers.
No, not.
Well, I mean, but the thing is, you're gonna have,
that-
you're gonna have juniors bringing freshmen
Yes.
and,
Yeah.
and trying to.
Well,
do
and
that.
for internet access, we do have kids
We
that
do have
drive
drivers,
now,
yeah.
so we do manage it
And
to
they
a
are
much
awesome.
smaller degree. But, you know,
The health department walkthrough, what does that look like? How is that? What is that process?
so we go through kind of a student schedule. The elementary was a little easier. We went to the specific classrooms, K1. We looked at the traffic flow, like where kids would come in,
They're
how,
looking at all of those things?
what's that?
They're looking at all of
Yes.
those things? Okay.
So how we're gonna screen, you know, you've seen the screeners up front, classroom setups. We look a lot at the nurses setup, which here is perfect because it's right here. Whereas isolation, because isolation has to be separate. You know, how's that work? So they go through those different nuances. So they'll do that at both places as well.
They also look at how we're wearing our masks within the schools, and if anyone's got a medical exception, if the shield that they have covers underneath and up to a certain point. So we learned a lot about that.
That's true. When we did at the elementary, we had a couple mask follow-ups with folks because of the way they wearing their mask and those different pieces. So that is a piece that they look at as well. So, and we walk it with the building administrator and kind of talk through those different pieces. We made some pretty significant shifts at New Kent Elementary as far as just a simple one, the isolation room, you have to go right across the two ladies in the office. Well, we didn't have the plexiglass there. So before kids came back, we were able to install the plexiglass in front of them because if you're taking a kid to isolation, they're symptomatic, so they need an extra layer of protection. It was just something like that to have an outside eye. I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So want to make sure we run that process here too. And they typically send multiple representatives. So our person that does the tracing piece, the person that does our health department meetings, kind of doing those pieces. So I just want to leave you with this. We are excited to announce the Summer of More. So those are meaningful opportunities for real world engagement. We're really going to ramp up our summer program. We're actually began working on this before we went out in March. We really want to do more in the summer. So this is the beginning of this. We will open this to as many kids as possible, to as many staff as possible. There's some really thrilling videos that are coming out soon of administrators hyping up this program. We wanted to have for elementary and middle 2-week sessions. Now you could attend both those sessions, but if you have vacation plans or other plans, we didn't want to rule you out from a 4-week session. The high school, it needs to be a 4-week session because of the credit pieces and the different components. But so the governor made an announcement a couple of weeks ago about March 15th being a return date. We're already ahead of his schedule on that. And he talked about summer learning. We already had a big plan for that. So I hated that he stole our thunder on that, but I wanted you to know that we're working really hard on that. A lot of our CARES Act money is actually going to drive this summer program. So it'll be a good recruiting tool for us. We'll be able to close some gaps. We'll be able to pilot some very innovative programs moving forward. So more to come, but I wanted to leave you with summer of more because we're managing it in person, but we're also going to create the future instructionally with the work we're going to do. So this does come before you for a vote. I believe later on in the meeting.
You know, just to clarify, and I think this is for
Thank you, guys.
all these people that are watching or whatever, is because the question is going to come up, as I kind of mentioned, is so why can't we do 5 days a week? And we need to communicate well to parents that based on our current structure of space and transportation, that's why we are unable to do that at this point. I mean, is that a true statement?
That is a true statement.
Okay.
And there are guidelines. People go, okay, they're guidelines, but there are also requirements too within those guidelines. So we pushed up against the guidelines to the requirement piece with the transportation. So guideline wise in transportation, it's 6 feet, like it's every other seat. Well, you can't run a bus with 11 kids on it. We can barely do it with 26 kids on it. So we're 1 per seat in a checkerboard fashion. So that's pushed up against the requirement piece. 6 foot is the guideline. We pushed up to the 3 feet requirement for space pieces. It does mean we quarantine more kids in the process, but that's what we have to do in order to do the in-person learning and still maintain the safety. So I would say, yes, that is the biggest obstacle that outside of mitigation and those pieces, but space in New Kent and space on buses everywhere is driving a lot of this across the Commonwealth.
Okay, moving on to new business. First item is staff compensation.
All right, and we were really, I still am really excited about this, but we've worked really hard this year through a lot of uncertainty to be extremely fiscally responsible. And we're at a point in the year that I'd like to recommend to the board that we put a bonus structure in place for our employees. So all full-time and part-time employees, contracted or letter of appointment staff, currently employed as of January 1st. So if you came to us partway through the year, we want to include you in this, would receive a 2% bonus on their March 15th paycheck. Okay, so that's the overall structure. So you may be asking why bonus and not a pay raise? When you do a pay raise, you also have to do it the following year as well. You'll see in our budget presentation that there's a lot of financial uncertainty in the next year. We do want to move forward with a raise next year. We know we can accomplish this budget in this cycle. So that's why budget, not raise. We wanted to put caps on both sides of it as far as the 2%. So it'd be a $500 minimum for employees. So part-time, full-time, $500 minimum bonus. And then we also want to put a maximum on it. So it would be a $1,500 maximum bonus for 2%, which would put the average bonus right around $1,012.95. So that would put the average teacher bonus somewhere around $1,100 for the bonus. So that's an approximate cost to us of $448,463.28. We would cover this through, we budgeted a mid-year salary increase, attrition and other savings that we've had throughout the year. So we can do this within our current budget and move forward to a raise. I got to tell you, this has been the hardest year of my entire educational career. And I couldn't have done it without Team New Kent, the entire 471 employees we have. They have an opportunity to do this bonus form and have it in their checks by March 15th. I would recommend that we do that and aggressively pursue a raise in the next school year. So be more than happy to answer any questions. I do have a list of what other school divisions have done. Most school divisions have done bonuses for staff because of a lot of the uncertainties that I mentioned in terms of enrollment, in terms of future finances. This puts us towards the top of that bonus piece with a couple of exceptions. So I could share that with the board as well as far as the neighboring, not even neighboring, we go all over the place on this one, but just want to see how we compare. So one of the messages through tonight is we want to make sure we take care of our people. We take care of them through mitigation, we take care of them through this piece. And just a small way to say thank you. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for doing this through insurmountable odds. And this has been tough, and from bus assistant to division leadership to everybody across Leslie and her team. And they've given hundreds of thousands of meals to folks this year. It's just, we have an incredible group. So that is something I would like to recommend to you, is to do a 2% bonus for staff with those caps on both sides. Be happy to answer any questions you have related to that. I will defer financially to Ms. Morkheim on that, but
So how did you come up with the number 2%?
because we were looking at a potential 2% raise, and we were looking at how much money we had available, how much money we could pull together, and what that would equate to. So there was a lot of working behind the scenes on what would be an equitable way to do it. So we had, where's the number I had? So we had around that $450,000. So what was the best way to distribute that to our employees? So, Haney, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, because a lot of conversation and brainstorming around this one.
Yeah, and I think, we have pushed, we're striving for a mid-year increase. To me, that's more ideal, but you'll see in the budget presentation that our hands were kind of tied a little bit with the governor's presentation of the 2% bonus or wage increase that had to be done after July 1st. There's some language now changing that over the biennium that would give a little more flexibility, but still with the funding and what we're looking at next year, I think we're still more comfortable with providing bonus at this time.
So really, this is the best financial decision we can make now for employees, but also looking forward as well. So,
Sorry, it's not more.
yeah. And really, Haney and I were working towards actually doing the raise piece because, long-term.
If we could use CARES Act money tomorrow, I'd use every dollar of it.
Well, and we'll get into that in a second, but that's probably one of the frustrating things is we do have money in other buckets. We're not allowed to, we cannot use it in these buckets, even for a bonus, we can't use it.
Use it anyway.
We
still got more checks in the checkbook, don't we?
Well, I don't have to defer to Haney on it for you. But I mean, that's kind of, we pushed down that road too. We wanted to do, and I believe Ms. Staskill actually asked on that one about essential employee. We've used the word essential for our employees. We're not allowed to apply CARES Act money because they don't meet the technical definition of the federal piece. So,
Well, that's
yeah.
a letter that we can write to our legislators. I mean, that's easy.
because that is a pot of money we could have
is.
utilized for that. Now we are utilizing that for a lot of other things, but that was our first push, and across the Commonwealth, the first push. Yeah. We got money just in the wrong buckets.
So do you
Well,
wanna-
cut a hole in the bottom of it.
Here we go.
So we'll move on to item B, which is your recommended budget.
Yes, so we do have, this is a first read of recommended budget. As you know, that the House and Senate are still meeting and working through that process. Hopefully will be done February 27th. There are some big changes between those two budgets. The House has a 3% salary increase for teachers, SOQ funded positions, standards of quality, so not all staff. The Senate has a 5% increase. So there are several things like that within the budget that could change our budget. But we wanted to bring you a recommended budget at this time. So kind of mentioned a lot of this already. Uncertainty is the biggest variable. We're uncertain as far as our enrollment. We're uncertain as far as future revenue. We're uncertain in just about every area. So a lot of incomplete data due to COVID. Flexibility is a necessity. We need to be poised to be flexible in this next budget, just as we were in this budget, to make the changes that we need to make. We met with division directors. We're reviewing our current expenditures, which once again, in this budget cycle is a little different because our expenditures are in a lot of areas that we don't typically spend, but looking across multiple years of how we're spending out of different lines. And also reviewing position requests. I've done one budget meeting with my parent advisory and teacher advisory. I have another one February 24th with parent advisory and teacher advisory as well, going through those pieces. And as I mentioned, we just need to, with all the uncertainty, be able to pivot. We need to be able to shift as needs emerge. Many unknowns, and I think one of the things I'm proudest of is how we strategically use federal funding and how we'll continue to utilize that. And I'll give you some examples of that. And Ms. Morgan, please join in as I mess up things. And once again, this is a work session, so feel free to ask a question or send me in a different direction. I did want to highlight COVID support. Mr. Mead brought that piece up. Very proud of our partnership with the county. So $814,000 through county support. A lot of that was directed towards PPE and those different components. Chief Opet and his team, fantastic job partnering with them as far as that CARES funding. We were able to do Chromebooks. We did over 200 plus mobile hotspots for families, and like a lot of big important things that made this year happen that came out of some of that CARES funding. We've received ESSER 1 funds, $214,000. That is completely going to run our Summer of More for salaries, for transportation, for food, for materials, for all of that. And that won't cover the whole thing, but that is what that money is there for. We also were very fortunate to compete for and receive $109,000 in set-aside grants for very specific things, special education, additional cleaning facilities, plexiglass, went after grants specific to that to help offset. And then received the CARES school funding in the amount of $579,933. So that's current year. That is money we're utilizing in the current year to make our return to in-person learning happen. Significant amounts of that school funding there, the 579, are going to HVAC replacement, specifically at the middle school. You know, ventilation is a big piece, and we know we have ventilation needs. We're addressing that through this as well. For 21-22, we are going to be rewarded. We have been awarded $821,000, but that will be in the 21-22 funding. So I wanted to show you current year and next year. So 2.5 million, yes.
So what will that be applied to? What does the ESSER be applied to in the 2022?
That is what we're working through now. It'll be additional HVAC projects, outdoor learning projects, additional PPE and things that we need beyond this school year. And then summer of 2022 will be, because I tell you, once we start the Summer of More, parents are going to want more of the Summer of More as we move forward. So we need to make sure that we're able to continue funding that as well. So once again, that's a significant amount of money that allows us to move forward on capital projects and do a lot of the work on technology. I think 300, 400 Chromebooks we're able to purchase through that. But one of the restrictions is we cannot use that for salary increases because it's one-time money. And we have to be careful in terms of funding positions out of that as well. So in that 21-22, not to get ahead of that, we do have a couple grant funded positions that we would bring to the board, but these are positions we would not need after 21-22. So one of the positions that we will talk about at some point, maybe somebody to manage these grants, because each one of these grants comes with a whole lot of paperwork, follow through, and in a small school division that's already stretched thin, it may benefit us to get a part-time grants person to manage this. And then when the grant goes away, we don't need the grant person anymore either. So those kind of things.
Even though this ends in 21-22, we will also have the fact that we are building a school, we will be adding FTEs.
Yes.
At the same time, so that will probably benefit us budgetarily. I would assume it would be easy to transition folks.
Yep. And I'll show you in a minute how we're going to leverage the new school year ahead of time in partnership with the county along that same thinking. But yes. Well, and the hope is that in 2 years, so after this year and the following year, we'll be in a different place and we'll be in a more certain place as well and be able to forecast better. Here's your summary of all funds slide. So you can see 21 to 22 and the change. We are fairly flat when it comes to the funding that we would receive overall. There's not a lot of new money in the governor's budget. So you can see the school general fund would change 3.8%. Textbook, because of the match that occurs with the textbook fund, would be down. School nutrition is down slightly, and school grants would be up. So a net increase between all these funds of 3.6%. So doesn't allow you a lot of room to do a lot with an increase of 3.6.
Could you explain the school grant fund?
I can get Haney to help me explain the school grant fund.
Those are really your federal funds, your Title I, Title II,
Okay.
60, and those, come each year with an award, and we track those individually. So the increase is really just planned increases that we see in our planned appropriations, and we'll probably see a little bit more uptick there as well.
And the textbook fund is going down because.
Really, because our enrollment is down, it's just based on funding, and what we match is actually in the general fund. So that's just the state dollars that we receive for this.
So when we look at our recommended budget for 21-22 and break it into the different buckets, local revenue would be down almost 6,000. State revenue, you see the change. So last year in state revenue, we were looking at over $1 million more money. This year, right now, with the governor's budget, we're looking at $292,593. And we may not get all of that because about, make sure it's not on there, about 130,000 is connected to Virginia Preschool Initiative. And we have to get enough kids and enough classes in order to get that fund from. So we're really looking at guaranteed, and nothing's guaranteed, but a little over 100,000 in additional state revenue, which is tough to move forward. So.
And that number is determined by our local composite index.
That's part of it. Local composite index, your enrollment, and then whatever bills and legislations that are passed that are connected to revenue pieces. Now, if they go 3%, so this has the governor's 2% in there. If they go 3%, that could go up. But remember, there's a piece we have to match too, so our contribution would have to go up on that as well. So that could change, but that's where we're at now. From the county, the requested change would be about $1 million, and I'm going to break that into two buckets. That's a big number. Over half of that is connected to the new school operating. So total change 3.8%. The requested county revenue 552 is operating expenses for the new elementary school, which includes positions. So it for current year operational, it would be a request of $450,000. And I'll talk about what we would do with that here in a second. We always give you this pie chart by category. It's no surprise that the biggest part of our pie is instruction. We are an instructional business. The other piece to note is that 83% of our budget is salary and benefits. So when we do an increase or we do something, we have to cut something. There's not a lot of wiggle room to cut outside of people to make this work. Couple of highlights for you. We talked a little bit earlier about our regional programs. We are seeing some increases at 3 of our regional programs. Code RVA being the outlier this year, but she has promised me we will see an increase in the following year. So we'll look forward to that. So Bridging Communities has an increase of 19,237. This is proposed. This still goes through their board as well. The largest chunk of that is to add an additional program, potentially a second medical program to that facility. So Governor School Chesapeake Bay has about a $1,500 tuition increase, and Maggie Walker $2,524. So we do have the largest amount of kids going to Bridging than the other programs, and with them adding a program, HVAC will go full-time. Remember, we lost an HVAC program a year or so ago. We got a half-time, and now we've added to full-time. So Casellas is doing a tremendous job of building that program. Other adjustments, fuel is going up. I don't have to tell you that. Transportation parts and supplies, we see an increase there. We do outsource our custodial with SSC. We will see an increase there of about $21,715. That is connected to the minimum wage going up in January. So that is connected to that, and that'll be a theme as we go through this, is keeping an eye on minimum wage going up, making sure that we're ahead of that with certain positions that we have. Like I said, feel free to stop me anytime. So salary and benefits, some of the highlights, minimum wage adjustments, which I just talked about. Those adjustments would vary across the scale. So in some places we do a step increase or a step, and in other places we would do an increase, but it's an eye on making sure that we're ahead of that piece with certain positions that we have in the organization. Healthcare adjustment is also not a surprise that it's a projected increase for healthcare. We're budgeting a significant increase there. Once we have our renewal presentation, we'll adjust that number. We benefited last year from the healthcare renewal coming in less, and we were able to apply those savings to other places. I don't anticipate that luck happening twice, especially with COVID and the current things that we're seeing. We are budgeting with the governor's increase, a 2% increase for staff, but we'd like to do some additional funding for further adjustments. We'd like to push into the teacher scale specifically, most of our staff teachers, but to do a budgeted 2% increase and push more into some of those salary scales and make those adjustments. That could change with the 3% or a 5%, or they compromise at 4%, we'll see. But that's kind of where we are now with the numbers that we know from the governor's budget.
Back to the minimum wage piece.
Yep.
What is the projection that the amount of revenue that's going to cost us over a period of time? I mean, are you building that already into the budget for the maximum amount?
We are taking really a measured approach as far as how we adjust it. So with an eye on 15 and kind of figuring out that timeline changes from with the General Assembly and where it's going to be, but looking at what we know we have to be at by January and what to be ahead of that, and also to be competitive. But so we do have the costs associated with staying ahead of that for this year. But I don't know, Haney, if we have the cost.
Something that I just learned recently with this minimum wage increases too, is that anybody that's making less than 15, you can't just put them at 15. You still have to put them in relation to each other. So if somebody has 2 years experience and they're making $14 an hour, and somebody has no experience and they're making
You can't put them at 15.
You can't put them just at 15. The one that's more
Higher.
experienced
Right,
still
okay.
has to make.
Still has to be a step process.
Right.
Okay.
Otherwise, you create that compression
Right.
and people are going to go elsewhere on that. If I can be brand new and make exactly what you're making after 4, 5, 10 years. So, when you raise the minimum wage, we've got to run that through almost not the entire organization, but through that whole classification of jobs. So we can give you the costs associated with raising
No, I
that.
mean, it's just, I think it's just gonna be real challenging for most school divisions in the future, because when you look at your hourly employees, is the challenge is, like you said, staying ahead of the curve, because there are gonna be other businesses, private businesses that are gonna be way ahead of school divisions.
So you can go to, just to name.
Just go to Amazon.
A big business in our community, Rosie's, who gave us a $10,000 check to GW today. So thank you for their continued support of our education efforts. You know, you can go there and do similar jobs that we have here for $15 versus, you know, that piece. So we do look at it as total compensation, but that is a big thing that we have to watch.
Also impacts our premiums and the affordability. So when the minimum wage goes up, we have to look at our portion the board contributes and the employees. So that's
Well,
another.
then workman's comp goes up
Yeah,
just
we
based
look
on
at
the
everything.
payroll and all of that.
So I mean, there's a
Trickle
domino
down
effect, trickle effect with this piece. And my slide advancer left me mid-presentation, so. Oh, we're back. You go. You go.
Oh.
Oh, Billa's done.
Is there-
Miller, we give you one job.
Yeah,
Okay, there we go.
uh-huh.
So we want to share the starting teacher salary comparison, but to the same point about minimum wage, we have to make that flow through the entire teacher scale. So this is the best we know right now, current year, with people we tend to compete with. So you can see where we are at the bachelor's level, and you can see where we are at the master's level, and you can see where we rank, which we definitely want to be higher than that. Our goal is to be in that top third. But know that, so master scale, for instance, we're at 47,238. So $800, we would be in that top third.
$1,600 from the top,
Yeah.
so.
So, you know, we don't like where we rank, but it's not as big a gap. But as we move, these other school divisions are moving too. I don't have to tell you that Henrico announced a major initiative.
Well, there's like 4.4 or something like that.
4.4, average teachers like 6.97. But that's a combined county school effort in their unified pay plan. They're making that move together, which is what it takes to make a move like that. I mean, that's a big push and a significant investment, not just for the current year. Like, you're on the hook for that the following year, and you want to do better and do better and do better. So, so our goal is to continue to work on all areas of the teacher salary scale, while also focusing on the starting piece and looking at, our concentration has been on that master's level teacher, and we'll continue to have that focus as well. So. So we have some new positions recommended. I talked about the additional preschool positions. We'd like to get at a point when the new school is on board that we have preschool at each site in multiple pre-K classrooms. So that's a goal. We have in there, and this is connected to standards of quality. There is a difference between the governor, the Senate, and the House about counselor ratios. But there is a request to add a high school counselor. That was a request that we had in last year, and it was a victim of the budget process. So, so 2 high school teachers, middle school teacher, at position at central office. We had 2 mid-year positions in that we did not move forward with this year. Lead ITRT will be bringing on hopefully bringing on a 4th technology person as we open the new school. And our current literacy and math coordinators to extend them to 12-month contracts. You know, we've been working on that piece, especially as we have the summer of more to make sure that we're adequately staffed. So that's a quick overview of new positions. Also, in working with the county has set aside the money for operating ahead of the new school operating. So the $552,000 that is in the county request is really in that new operating budget. And so the county has requested that we have, here are requests for operating current year, and here are our new school operating. So we've broken them into those buckets. We will need a planning principal ahead of time. We can't open and then have a principal, so we need the principal ahead of time on that. Similarly, we do need a secretary connected to it. We'd like to request to have that instructional technology person on board, and these folks will be working in our current schools a year ahead of time. 2 additional elementary teachers. We know there are going to be some gaps and some needs. We have elementary teachers in this new elementary school budget. We'd like to get them a year ahead of time. So lower class size, do some remediation efforts and kind of push in there. A PE teacher along with that as well. With a 4th school, we need additional maintenance support. So there is a maintenance position in that operating budget. We'd like to do that a year ahead of time as well. And a paraprofessional. So when you add up those salaries, that's about $552,000 that we'd like to access from that new school operating budget. In conversations with the county, there are other opportunities to access that money for one-time projects, which we'll continue to talk about moving forward what those could be. So next steps, we have our board meeting March 1st. There's a proposed budget presentation to Board of Supervisors March 8th. That's with the county administrators. Working on a joint budget retreat for March 12th. More information coming on that as well. Once we're at that point, or before we get to that point, we will have a public hearing, as we always do on the recommended budget. Budget approval and then budget adoption. I know we don't love TBDs, but this budget process is as uncertain as anything we've been doing. The county has backed up their timeline and we're making ours match theirs. So more to come on that. We do have our budget email set up. So if you have feedback, questions, or concerns as we run through this process with the public, people can ask that at any time. So I don't know if you have other questions or things you'd like to see moving forward or adjustments you'd like to make at this point. I know compensation is a priority for the board and we'll continue to push on that piece as the biggest piece. And kind of working through there. Hanny, I don't know if you want to add anything or I left out or just let me run with that one. I appreciate Hanny and her team for doing a tremendous job of managing the grants and kind of getting this to this point. I know I kind of make it look easy, but there's a ton of work that goes into balancing a budget.
We know Amy does.
She does, absolutely. I'm not even gonna pretend.
Next,
That does not require action at this time, so.
next item on the agenda is the sale of surplus vehicles.
Actually, I'm gonna take that from Herman. We are just presenting a letter that Ron had requested, sale of equipment like he has in the past. This is brought to you for approval this evening.
And old business redistricting update, Mr. Miller.
Yes, members of the board, Dr. Nichols. When we said at the last meeting, we come back with some input on redistricting. We did have a survey out, so wanted to update you on how that went. So just a reminder here at the beginning of this is our timeline that we're following right now. We do have a meeting this week with our team to take a look at survey results. It's tomorrow. And go over those so we can get together a final recommendation for your March 1st meeting.
So we're still on track for that March 1st meeting to provide a recommendation for you as a first read.
As a reminder from our last meeting, we had 2 options, mainly centered around this planning block right here, which is Oakmont, is the main difference, which is the front end of the Breakshire community. So option A, that community would go to Watkins, and option B, that community would go to elementary school. There are other communities in here that are shifting. That's just the only difference between these 2 options.
And we have a meeting set up with Oakmont for tomorrow.
Thursday.
Thursday. So we've done specific
Thursday.
reach to the Oakmont community, including a phone call directly to phone call, email, that piece. And we have a Zoom session set up there as well. Once again, due to COVID and limitations, and that's the best way for us to do that. But really, because they're the major difference between the 2 maps, to do specific outreach to them. So Ms. Barbara's been helping me with that, and Remley Sherman, who teaches at New Kent Elementary and lives in Oakmont, has been as well. And I think Ms. Swiffer's going to join us for that Zoom session. It'll be a lot of the information we've already covered, just doing specific Q&A for Oakmont.
And the number of students in that planning block right now is about 50, right?
Yeah, somewhere in that 30 to 50 range is,
Right.
Mhm. But it's a big community. Do you know how many homes are in there roughly? I don't know.
no,
Isn't it a combination of like single family and there's some townhomes in
There are
there?
some townhomes and single-family homes in Oakmont.
So then, just wanted to highlight, these are some of the ways we communicate through this process leading up to this. We have tried to get it out there quite a bit through both Facebook website as well as our presentation at the last meeting. So really trying to get people engaged. That being said,
I'm saying, however,
here's our survey numbers. We had a total of 69 survey responses countywide and 29 from Watkins and 40 from New Kent Elementary School. So not nearly as many responses as we had hoped for.
That's a fairly low percentage.
extremely low. When you're talking about 1,200 kids
Yeah.
or, and maybe it's less than that because we are a year out from that, but still very low. And we've done phone dollars, we've done, all of those different things to go through that process. And we'll continue the outreach initiative. It's not from lack of effort or lack of diversity in ways we're trying to outreach. And some of it could be limitations in our current setup.
On top of this, I received one phone call. I don't think we got very much communication, but I received one parent call that I talked with about their concerns.
And it's not too late. So, I mean, that's another reason why this has been a board agenda item for the past few meetings, is just another opportunity for folks to engage.
But essentially, the only variable we're looking at is Oakmont, so people that are in other
Right.
districts, they're
pretty much set.
Right, there's not that we couldn't do some massaging of it, and I think we found one area that we will kind of move the line a little bit because it impacts a specific subset of folks, but, so I mean, that could be one of the reasons that the engagement, and when you look at the 69, there is a higher engagement with the Oakmont community. But we just want to do everything we can to have the word out there and communicate the message and get input.
So as far as the feedback on option A, in the Watkins district, 45% approved it. That's 13 respondents. And overall, if you look at that, that's 22 people who are neutral to above, which is higher, obviously. Then New Kent Elementary School, the respondents from there, 25%, which represents that 10 that actively approve it. Overall, 33% would approve of option A. Option B.
Option A is Oakmont to
Watkins.
To Watkins.
Yeah. So then option B, where Oakmont stays in New Kent Elementary School, you can see the shift. Watkins dropped a slight bit on approving. New Kent Elementary School increased significantly on improvement. And so a lot of this is the Oakmont community. And
So the initial
Keep
feedback,
their students going to the same school, basically.
yes.
so the initial feedback from Oakmont in a limited sample, and we'll certainly get more of that, is they would like to stay
Where they are.
at the New Kent Elementary. Yes.
So some of the next steps, again, we have a meeting tomorrow as a redistricting committee, and then on Thursday, we'll be meeting with the Oakmont community to talk directly to them. And again, still very much on track to have a recommendation coming back to the board in March.
If we needed to slow that timeline at any point, we can do that. We just want our families to have over a year's worth of notice that a shift could occur. So we have built in some wiggle room in this, but we're still on track on our side. Be happy to answer any questions or suggestions you have. It's a fairly clean redistricting option. We used couple of surveys were about Airport Road, and Airport Road is a marker. So if you're on one side of Airport Road, you will be at one school, and you're on the other side. That was by design to have major roads be the point. But what we didn't want is if you were in this specific neighborhood, that both sides of the neighborhood would have different schools. So we've avoided that. Oakmont is technically a different neighborhood than Berkshire. They have their own association, their own everything, but still, we want to be mindful of that piece there. Right.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to our action items. First up, do I hear a motion to approve personnel matters as presented?
I move we approve personnel matters as presented.
Do I hear second?
I'll second.
Heather? All those in favor? Do I hear a motion to approve the staff compensation as presented?
So moved.
And second,
I second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Do I hear a motion to approve the sale of surplus vehicles as presented?
Make a motion, we approve this sale of surplus vehicles as presented.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do I hear a motion to approve the return to in-person learning plan for cohort 4 as presented?
I move we approve the return to in-person learning plan for cohort 4 as presented.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That adjourns our meeting.
Next meeting, March 1st, be a regular board meeting.
Yes.